Welcome to One Move at a Time, the U.S. Chess Podcast, where we highlight individuals and organizations advancing our mission to empower people, enrich lives, and enhance communities through chess. Welcome back to another episode of One Move at a Time. I'm here with Adam Weissbarth, one of the founders of the Silver Knights Chess Academy. It's arguably the most successful after-school chess program, as well as just chess program in general in the United States. I'm very excited to pick your brain today about your program and your overall philosophy and highlight the success of your organization. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's great to be here.
So let's get started with your early career. How did you get introduced to chess?
Well, I was 5 years old, and I was with my mom flying to visit my uncle across the country. And we got to his apartment late at night, and my mom and my uncle are trying to hustle me off to bed. And I noticed this, thing set up on my uncle's coffee table. It was a decorative chess set. And I was asking them, what it was. I was interested in it. And they basically said, Adam, just go to bed. It's late at night. They're not playing all day. Just who cares? It's a game for grown-ups. And I was like, well, what is it? What is it? And I was very curious. And finally, I agreed to go to bed if they promised to show me how the game worked first thing in the morning. So 6 o'clock the next morning, I'm up. Hey, Mom, and my uncle, can you show me how this game works? Neither of them really played much chess, but they knew how the pieces moved. And they showed me. I played them a couple games, and I was just hooked, and it's lasted now almost 40 years.
That's awesome. So can you take us back to 2004 when you saw an ad to coach at a chess elementary school? What made you decide to take the leap into chess coaching?
So what made me decide to take the leap into chess coaching, it's interesting. I kind of always coached chess. I just don't know that I would have called it that. When I was 10 years old, I taught my younger brother to play so that I would have someone to play with. He's actually now my business partner in the organization. And he's taught actually more kids than I have at this point. In high school, I went back to my old elementary school and I taught a bunch of the kids there to play. When I was in college, I found random jobs teaching private chess lessons here or there. So the idea of sort of coaching chess for money as an adult never really occurred to me. But when I saw an ad for it, it was honestly the easiest decision of my life to just take the leap. It kind of conflicted with some things that I was already committed to be honest, in my master's program. I was in graduate school at the time, but easiest decision I ever made, because I was I couldn't imagine not doing it when there was an opportunity to go, teach 15 kids at a local elementary school.
So 2 years later, Silver Knights gets started. Did you ever imagine that it would grow into what it is today?
Well, I wanted it to, but it's a little bit intimidating at first. When I decided to take the leap and try and start an organization to do this, it's very difficult to get even one school to trust you with their students and to set up sort of a way to run a program. And I had to call 100 schools to get 4 responses. I just cold called schools over and over and over. A little discouraging because 96 out of 100 I never heard back. But at the 4 that did, those were my first 4 schools. And I was a little bit worried because I had kind of quit my other career to do this, and 4 schools was great, but it wasn't going to pay the rent on my apartment. So I got some good advice from actually the same uncle who helped teach me how to play chess, which was, this was the summer before I started, and I had these first 4 schools set up, and I was pretty nervous about paying my rent that fall. He said, Adam, if you're successful in 5 years, your time may be worth a lot of money, but right now it's worth nothing. You have no way to turn your time into money because nobody knows who you are and nobody is looking for chess lessons from you right now. Just go find any opportunity you can to teach kids for free all summer long, and just see if any of them invite you into their school. Maybe you'll pick up a couple more schools that way. So I decided to go to a bunch of different libraries and just offer free chess programs all summer. And it was amazing. I taught hundreds of kids. Their parents were all there watching the lessons. And at the end of that, I got 12 more invites, which from kids in those free library programs to come to their schools and teach. And so I had to get very creative with the scheduling, but those were my first 16 schools, and that's what I started the company with. And then it was just, it was wild and crazy and really working all the time. I was putting about 1,000 miles a week on my car, just driving from one school to another all over the place. But at the same time, I kind of miss it because it was a lot of fun, and it was working with a lot of kids, and some of them went on to become very strong players, and a lot of them just are people who got into chess, really had a good time for a couple years, and are know how to play now as adults.
Now, I'd like to highlight, because of having an after-school chess business myself and going through a lot of these, say, growing pains with cold calling as well as making those initial connections. I'd like to make recommendations to the audience of what I found successful, and I'd definitely like your opinion on it as well. I hired people to do the cold calling approach and had the same kind of discouraging results. I mean, you get 1 in 100 or so, but I found that if you're communicating with a PTO parent at a school, they have a direct line to administration, and being that I was an educator for many years, I know what it was like for our admin to get a call from an outside entity. It's typically seen as spam. But if you can communicate directly with the PTO parent, they are passionate about the school, have a direct line to administration, you have a lot higher chance of getting a program at the school. That would be my recommendation to those who are looking to get into more schools in an area, as well as that donation of time. It cannot be highlighted enough. I was given a great opportunity by Chess Kid back 2013 or 14, analyzing games at nationals at their booth. And that was a huge kickoff point, analyzing hundreds of games in a weekend. So if you have these opportunities, definitely seize them, as you'll make connections with students and parents, which will bear fruit.
Yeah, I think all of that is very good advice. I totally agree about the PTO or PTA to school being a good entry point. It's challenging because school districts have a lot of rules. So, public school is where most kids go, and they've got a lot of rules, and you just kind of have to figure out how they work and get to know people there. And as you said, just put yourself out there in as many ways as possible and hope that good things come from it.
So, impact. Silver Knights has produced over 50 state and national scholastic champions. What do you think the secret is to cultivating talent in young players?
I think that, in the beginning, really it was just about inspiring as many kids as we could to love playing chess. And that's really what after-school programs are for, and that's what we started out with. But honestly, for many years, we didn't have a ton to offer to kids once they got past the beginner stage. Because at any given school program, most of the kids are going to be sort of beginners to low intermediate players. So it's hard to teach a class just for the benefit of the best couple students. And that's really not what's best for the group. And so you end up in this cycle where the kids that are most excited about it and become the most skilled, within a couple years, sometimes kind of outgrow the club from the perspective of learning and improving their own chess. And what's changed on our side recently is since the pandemic, we've started teaching kids that outgrow school programs, both our own and programs all over the country, in what we call an online academy program. The format of that is basically semi-private lessons where kids are grouped with other kids of the same ability in a small group. And there's a lot of kids in this now. It's kids from all 50 US states and all over Canada, some other countries. And I think the key to cultivating, the talent and the desire that young kids have to improve is having them work with an appropriate peer group, that like a small group of kids that are like them. And that's what's so hard to find past a certain point in an after-school program. Because, by definition, the most skilled 2 or 3 players in any given school's club are starting to outgrow it a little bit. And they need to be pushed by finding kids that are at their level or even a little bit above their level. And so teaching those kids online in really small groups has kind of unlocked this way to help those kids improve and just learn more faster. And I think there's a lot of other things that help. Having it be really interactive is important. And there's software that can help with that. But really, the key is having the right peer group of like real kids who know their name. It's a small enough group that they get to know each other. They know the coach knows them, and the lessons are right at the level that they need to keep improving.
And I've got to very, very much encourage this approach. Probably my biggest regret as a developing chess player is I started at 15. And growing up in Southeast Alabama, there weren't a lot of strong players, not a lot of opportunities to play. So I had to travel quite a bit to get games in. And I felt very isolationist. So it's one of the things when I travel around and do camps today, I say, okay, guys, how many of you will ever have to play against each other? You're in the same rating range, but you're from different states, different age groups. If you're never competing, why not play serious training games against each other, share ideas, and it's a collaborative effort. Once you get to, say, 1,800 plus, you're top 10% or less these days when you're looking at the overall rating system. So I very, very much encourage investigating this group work. I think it's fantastic for players, their development, and just that socialization element, because chess gets lonely the higher up you go.
Yeah. So
having people that relate to you and relate to the struggle, I think it's extremely important.
I completely agree. And I also grew up in not a particularly large area. I grew up in New Mexico. So even though I played at a younger age, I can really relate to that, feeling that you have to travel to find tournaments, and hundreds of miles at a certain point to get bigger events or rated events. And I think this can kind of unlock a lot of things, because you can just train with whoever is like you anywhere in really North America.
So you've made chess accessible through scholarships and community partnerships. Why is accessibility such a central part of the mission?
Yeah, we have tried our best to make it accessible to families that don't have the ability to pay. And to give an idea of the scale, in the past year, we gave out more than $80,000 worth of need-based scholarships to chess programs and tournaments. I think as far as why do we do that, I guess, I don't know, I was thinking about this, and as we were writing up kind of a year in review thing, and my temple does this community service day every year, and the rabbi said something at one of these days that really stuck with me, which is basically that the world has all these problems, and you can't fix them all by yourself, but you're also not free to sit there and do nothing, and you have to do the best you can, and that's kind of your obligation to be a moral person. And I really think that that's right, and that kind of rang true for me. And that's how we try to approach this. Like, I wish we could give every kid a free, high-quality chess program with a live coach, either online or in person, but we can't. There's just financial constraints that obviously make that impossible. But we can do a lot, and so we should do as much as we can, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, it's hard to say anything other than that's amazing. And if I know a lot of what we do is is thankless, but I want to say on a personal level, I sincerely appreciate that because it does make a huge difference, and I see how much chess impacts lives. So I've got to, in the very least, congratulate you on that effort.
No, thank you. And I agree. I think it does too. I mean, I think it's good for kids to play chess, even if they don't become the most skilled players. I think it's, it teaches a lot of patience and learning consequences for decisions and experiencing success and failure, and what really, you really feel the emotions of it when you win and lose a game. And I think going through that and learning to deal with it gracefully is a very helpful skill later in life, because we all have successes and failures in our professional lives and our personal lives as adults. And if you've handled some very painful failures as a kid, I think it can help give you the tools to handle that better as an adult.
So I'd like to turn our attention on the innovation and online expansion, because I was a teacher, classroom teacher during COVID, and I had to redo everything to be able to shift to do online, and it was quite cumbersome, but it had a lot of positive elements to it. It sounds like you guys took the experience and ran with it. So how did that look, that transition?
Well, it all sounds great now, but I have to be honest, it was, the most chaotic and stressful time that I think I've ever experienced. Just to give you an idea, we had, at that time, we were just teaching in school programs. We had about 250 employees, coaches going to teach after school programs all over, basically Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Maryland. And when COVID hit, in one day, that 250 went to 3. And, it was so unbelievably painful. In one day, we had to basically dismantle this organization that it took me 15 years to build. And, all these people that we had hired that, we really cared about, that were doing good work, all the kids that weren't going to see our programs anymore. It was very painful. And at first it was really, the online teaching was done out of necessity, like you said. We were just trying to stay alive, basically, as an organization. And, it was how much cash is in the bank account and how long is it going to last and how long do we have to figure this out and try and deliver something that, all of our families were also at a time of maximum chaos because their schools were all closed at first. So what are they doing? How are they managing their child care and their children's education and their own jobs? And can we actually break through that and deliver something that anybody notices and they actually want to go pay for, and devote their time and attention to doing? And I think a bit like you say, Brian, there can be advantages to online, but it's not the same. So in person, we'll teach up to 15 kids with one coach. We found that when we tried that, it didn't work as well online. It's just harder, especially a lot of our kids are young elementary age, like maybe 5 to 8. It's just hard for the kids to navigate at first. And so we found that the maximum we could teach was 8. So we had to find a way to make it work with 8 kids max per coach. We found out that having multiple windows open did not work well. So for example, a Zoom window, so that the kids and the coach can see each other, and then also like a Lichess or chess.com window. That didn't work because of the clicking back and forth for the younger kids. So we had to find software where everything's in one window and everything in one browser tab. The kids can see the coach, they can see the other kids, and they can see the chessboard. And we found that we needed some way for the kids to interact. Obviously in person, as you know, there are ways to run a very interactive class where the kids participate a lot. Even if there's 15, 20, 30 kids, you can do that if you're an experienced teacher. Online, it really is different, especially with young kids that can't use all the features of the technology particularly fluently without getting distracted. So So, we found software that lets us like hit a quiz button, and every kid sees a quiz. They're presented with the position. They click the move they want to make. The coach immediately sees what moves each kid said, and then can react to that in real time. And it's, three of you suggested knight to b3. That's a great idea. It doesn't quite work. Who can tell me why? And then someone says why it doesn't. Okay, one of you suggested pawn takes pawn. Let's talk about that. Okay, one of you suggested this other move. That's the right move. Let's talk about why. So it's incredibly fast, so the kids don't get bored, and you have to use the tools that are there to be interactive, and it's just different than in person. It's not that I don't even think it's really that one is better or worse, but you just kind of have to do it differently in order for it to be a good experience for the kids.
Let me go off on a big tangent.
Sure.
So I've very often reflected on the fact that I started at 15, and I tried to put my finger on the major difference between chess education, say then and now. And I'll be honest that the number of chess books that I read is less than what I've written at this point. I was always a game analysis fiend. I would play and want to know exactly what I did wrong and try to fix it, and kind of look at my game as a sinking ship that constantly needs to be worked on and repaired to stay afloat. So with the comparison to today, with all of the access to information, you see the level of play in games is ridiculously high compared to 10 years ago. I would say there's probably 150 to 200 rating difference in class tiers just from access to information. Do you think today it's harder to become, say, a master compared to 10 years ago, or easier due to the access of information? Because my main thing that I highlight, that when I was in high school in the 2000s, our phones had like the snake game compared to social media and doom scrolling and everything we have today, and how much time is spent on devices. So post-COVID, we have all these positive things and adaptive technology, but so many distractions from the technology as well. What do you think?
Well, I agree with that, and I don't really know. That actually sounds like a great thing for somebody at US Chess to study is the percentage of players that make master different now than a generation ago. I guess my guess would be that it's kind of similarly difficult. But the specific challenges are different now than a generation ago. So like I went to high school in the 1990s, and that was when a lot of my improvement took place. And, for me, the big challenge was getting challenging opponents to play. There'd be like one 1700 player in the small city where I grew up, and I played him like 20 times in rated games because there weren't that many other people. You go to a tournament, that's who you play, and at a certain point it's like, okay, I got to go to Las Vegas, got to go to LA, got to go to Phoenix just to find bigger events, and then you have to make the most of them and really find ways to study and improve and be very self-motivated. As opposed to today, where, like you said, I think the challenge is almost different. It's like, okay, one challenge is you probably just in raw chess skill terms, you have to be a better player today to make 2200 than you did like 20 years ago when I did. I think that's probably just a fact if you look at games with computers or whatever. But on the other hand, you do have all these tools that didn't exist then, so it's just objectively easier to play objectively better moves, whether you're a kid or an adult. I do agree with you that I think the main challenge is distraction from devices and things like that. And, why don't more people do it? It's because of distractions, and maybe also a little bit because there's so much chess content out there that people don't know what to do. There's hundreds of things to look at, videos to watch, Chessable courses to take, articles or books to read, tournaments to play in, blitz to play. What do you do to improve? Do you study versus just play and do what's fun? And I guess what we've always defaulted to when we're working with young kids is really just whatever is going to inspire them to love the game more and to want to go play in their free time is really it. Like, I truly don't believe that I just don't think there's like, oh, these are the 10 things you need to know to make chess master or something. Like, a real chess game is like, a down and dirty fight. It's like you're fighting with someone and it's messy and you've got to find a way to come out on top. Like, that was always my experience when I played in graded games. It's like you look at it afterwards with a computer and it's easy to be kind of clinical about it. Like, oh, well, this move would have been better and my opponent missed a chance here. But when you're experiencing it in the moment, it's not like that at all. You're wondering if you're doing the right thing. Did you miss something? Is this thing a great idea or a terrible one? What's your opponent going to do? And it's just this messy experience. And so I just think that, like, whatever will get kids to practice and want to play more on their own and be more excited about it and more engaged in the games when they're playing in tournaments, that's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, I got to agree. It's that engagement and developing the love. It's absolutely critical for the improvement, and it's got to carry you through the tough times. I very much look at chess improvement like going to the gym. If you're only working out one area, say your right arm, you're not going to look correct after a while. So definitely spread around your time and don't neglect the psychological part of the game. Because too often I have players come to me in, say, the 1900 to 2100 rating range that have been stuck for a few years, and they ask, well, what's going on and why? And it's not very often we find in chess text, because I feel like authors are still competitive for the most part. They don't want to share the psychology of competition. But one of the most common mistakes I see is players are too willing to take draws with higher rated opponents. That's just one of the many features that you can get stuck. And I was guilty of that. Anytime I was facing a 2400, I've got black, I could even have a slight edge. If they offered a draw, I would immediately question all of my fabric and morals as a chess player about playing on. But little things.
It's interesting you say it, because I was stuck for a really long time, maybe 10 years, right around 2000, 2100. So I experienced this too. And I think what actually got me over that hump was I basically just made a friend that was he was rated 2100, actually a little bit higher than me. And he lived nearby. And both of us were, I was younger then and single and no family. And we just would like meet up and study and play blitz like 3 nights a week for hours. And I had a great time. And now, what did we study? I don't know. We spent like a month learning the main line of the French defense with white. Like, how many games have I won from that? Like, probably 2 ever or something. But you just get so much better and so much more excited about chess, so much better at calculating. And that just carried me through to like my last 150 points to make master. And I think about that a lot. And I think that's what kids need too. When you're a kid, even if you get to 800 or something, you're already better than, unless you go to a chess school in New York or something, you're probably way better than every other kid at your school. And it's like hard to find a group of kids that are like you. And I think that's the most important thing, is you need to have this peer group. You become friends with them, you play with them, and you talk with them and find out how they think about chess. And I think to me, that's like the secret to improving. It's like you said, chess can be very solitary, but unlocking that bit of socialization around it makes it more like, team sports or something, where, the social aspect is a big part of what carries the interest forward for a lot of kids.
So can you tell us about some standout moments or an event from your online academy maybe a memorable guest or a unique story that happened?
Boy, we've got a lot. So I think the most fun thing that I can think of recently is we went to Super Nationals in Orlando, and we had about 75 kids there and several coaches. I went. I was one of them, and like the most fun thing was the first day in our team room. All the kids, because all these kids they take lessons in the online academy, but they're from all over the country, and so they don't know each other in real life. But they come to this, and it's like, they're talking to each other, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, are you like Spider, 8725? Oh, I'm so-and-so. And it's like these two kids who were like, they've been in the same class a bunch of times, and so they know each other. There's only like 5 kids in their class. They've played, 40 blitz games against each other, but they've never met in real life, and seeing how fun that is for them. And then their parents, start talking to each other and make friends. Like, to me, that's really what it's all about. And that's, that's the most magical part of it. In terms of memorable guests and experiences, we've been really lucky. We've had a lot. Like, early in the pandemic, we got this idea, like, hey, let's see, we're doing this online. We could never get like a U.S. champion to come and do something, or a famous chess player to come and teach our kids. But hey, it's all online now. Like, why don't we just ask some people? And so we asked a couple of people, a couple of former U.S. champions that came on and delivered some really cool lessons. And then at some point, I was just, I was talking to my brother, and I was like, why don't we just ask, like, let's just ask Judit Polgar. Like, who cares? So what if she's in Hungary? Like, she could just ignore us or say no. We haven't lost anything, but maybe she would do it. And so, we sent her an email, and she did. And so, she taught this amazing guest lesson, and what a cool experience for the kids to be able to sort of meet online and ask questions to the best female player who's ever lived. And, a lot of the best questions were like, they're not even about chess things in some cases. It was like one kid asked something about, from one of her books, she talks about her like stuffed animal that she would take with her to games when she was really little, and then she like still had the thing and like brought it out and showed it. So just really cool moments like that I think the kids remember for a long time. And then that just serves the goal of getting them more excited about chess, which is, in a way, I think that's like more impactful from someone like Judit than a particular chess idea, which, she could show them, but also the child's regular coach could show them the same thing, So I think it's very cool to see the kids meet people like Judit. We've had Anish Giri, we've had Magnus a couple times. And I think it's always cool when the kids get to see these famous chess players just as real people, because they are.
Very cool. So what I'm hearing is there's a lot of work that goes into what you do. So with a 100-pound dog, basketball coaching, and a family, how in the world do you have a work-life balance going on?
I mean, the honest answer is I don't. I'm very busy. But I think we've been at this with Silver Knights for 19 years now, and we have a really great team, and not just coaches, but also staff. And, I rely very heavily on our, 15 or 20 full-time staff, and a lot of them, have been involved with our program for a very long time, either, starting out as coaches or as parents of children that took the program and then got, excited about being a part of it. And so I think, at a certain point, it's definitely just a team effort.
So what's one surprising or funny moment from your time? Because you're on the Howard Stern show. So anything fun happened there?
Probably nothing I could share. Yeah, that was about 20 years ago, and there's a chess master named Dan Heisman who's done a lot of coaching, and he's a fairly well-known coach. And I guess Howard Stern got interested in chess a while ago and like Googled or something to find a chess coach. He found Dan, and Dan gave him lessons for a long time, and they got to know each other. And then I won a chess tournament where the prize was that Dan ran as a fundraiser for I think for breast cancer research, and the prize was like a visit to the Howard Stern show. And so I was like, okay, like I had actually never listened to it before, but I did go on, and he put us on the show for a couple hours. It was definitely a unique experience, I'll say that. He does actually love chess, legitimately, or at least he did at that time. I don't know. So it was very, very unique, a very unique experience.
Yeah, and I remember looking years ago, and I want to say he's around a 1600 or 1700 rated over the board player. So he's quite good.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
So what's next for Silver Knights now that you've returned to independent ownership? Because there was a time period there with Chessable and then Chess.com.
Yeah, I think we really have two sort of distinct parts of our organization. We have the school-based program in, Maryland, DC, Virginia, that's fairly mature. We're teaching in almost 400 schools every week, and we want to keep that program running well. There's always things to improve. I think the other part of our organization is the online academy, and I'm sort of excited to see what happens with that over the next few years. Like, we're historically, just in a philosophical sense, we're not all about competitive success for top scholastic players. Like, that's just not what gets me up in the morning. It's I'm more motivated by just making an after-school program or a great experience for like a typical kid. And but we can't ignore that we've had a lot of competitive success from our program in the last year or so. We had 11 kids win state scholastic championships from different parts of the country, and I think like 8 different states from this academy program. So I'm definitely I think we're sort of serving that part of the program too. We just hired our 3rd grandmaster coach to teach the elite program, which is for kids rated over 1400. Of course, that's only about the top 10% of the kids in the academy. Most of them are not in that, but it just keeps growing organically. It's mostly kids that started from a much lower level and just progressed through the program, and eventually, we had to kind of hire and higher rated coaches. So I'm very interested in if we can keep that going in 2026 and beyond. I think we would like to have more of a presence at nationals, or continue that from earlier this year, because that is what the more competitive players. I don't mean competitive like they're really serious about it, but just more skilled players that are really into it. So I think we need to serve that part of our community also, and I'm very excited to see what we can do with that over the next few years.
And if you could give a piece of advice to parents who want to introduce their kids to chess, what would it be?
I think the biggest advice for parents that would like their kids to play chess and want to introduce them to chess is to just keep it fun and centered on what the kid wants. It is really beneficial for kids to play chess, and they're probably going to learn a lot of positive life lessons from it. I think a lot of parents believe that chess makes their kids smart, and I would agree with that. But if it's something that they force on the kid, it's not going to last. So I would just say look for a program and a coach or a team of coaches that inspires your kid to love the game. and to want to play on their own, because they don't, there's a million people that can teach how to checkmate with 2 rooks, but what really determines if a kid is going to fall in love with the game and keep playing is how much fun they're having and the friends they're making along the way. And I think that's much more important than, learning the right opening or studying the right group of fundamentals.
Well, I've got to say that I personally very much enjoyed this interview, and I hope our viewers have as well. Thank you for coming on as a guest. And, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Brian.
Our game we're going to be exploring is from the DC Chess League. It's a playoff in 2013 where Black is in a must-win situation. Black is Adam, and his opponent is 2300, so this is one of the first games we've had where we've got 2 masters playing against each other. And let's kick it right off as we get an Italian-style game with this early bishop c4. And I really liked Black's preparation here. Knight c6, followed by knight a5. This is the main line, and it's logical as this is very likely going to be an open game, and the bishop pair is going to be stronger. So being able to grab this bishop very early in the game is going to take away a lot of those tactical possibilities against f7. And Black plays to open up the position immediately with d5. Since we've gotten the bishop pair, we are now looking to open the position to favor the bishops. So after e takes d5, a move to keep a bit more tension, bishop b4, and knight takes d5. Black already has a small plus due to grabbing that bishop pair earlier. Now, castle, castle. Knight takes d5. Queen takes d5. And we're beginning to see how the bishops are stronger here. And where's this knight going that it's going to be very useful? Knight c3, trying to potentially get to the e4 square. I like keeping the queen on this diagonal. Potentially, we can look at getting the bishop to b7 to complete our development, where we'll have some big threats against the king. White actively is playing against this plan and tries to get the knight to this post. At some point, we can look at playing f5 to kick the knight, but in the meantime, let's just finish development. b6, and as white attacks our bishop, we have to ask, where is the best square? In this case, I don't want to trade the bishop pair in the open position, so placing the bishop on c5 or d6, out of the question. And if we go to a5, b4 is going to trap the bishop, so bishop e7. And I very often recommend to my students, use a thinking process. Here we had a very easy example of the bishop being attacked. Use Kautov's thinking process. I want to compare 3 moves, find the most aggressive move. Sometimes when it's purely defensive in this way, we have to make a decision based off of the immediate threat. Queen h5. So the question is, what's the problem? What's the immediate threat here? Well, we have attack against our e5 pawn. Now in the game, f5 was played, and Black does retain an advantage here, but we'll have to part with the bishop pair immediately after f5, knight g5, which I would like to avoid if possible. The bishops are just so good, don't allow that trade. So if you're a pause your video type of person, we know what Black did in the game. How would you improve? All right, potentially you found a way to protect the pawn and take away counterplay, so we could slowly press. f6 I feel is the strongest move in the position, and white's obliged to play something like f4 to go for an all-out attack on the king side, where we can go bishop b7, and now that f5 threat is even stronger as it's backed up with the mate threat on g2. In the main game though, we have f5, and after knight g5, have to part with a bishop pair. And this is another interesting position, because the first choice of the engine did not stick out to me when I was initially going through the game. See if you could find it. Well, the engine wants to cut off key squares of the bishop, where the bishop has to reroute in an awkward way, but it doesn't have a lot of strength on the a3 square for flexibility. And we can change the plan from the game going bishop b7 to bishop f5, as we're going to be targeting these weak pawns and have very easy development here. But this game is going to have some very interesting moments coming up, stemming from this attack with bishop b7. White decides to play f3 to block the long diagonal. Queen d5, natural enough, hitting 2 pawn weaknesses. b4. And we could take on d3, but the potential of activating White's rooks, when you've got your opponent in a passive position, keep him in a passive position. I very much understand a5, playing against the pawn structure. We get a few trades in, and now instead of grabbing that pawn and giving activity, White's stuck nursing this pawn, playing defense, keeping that rook away from our king and out of the game. e4, utilizing that pin on the pawn and potentially weakening that kingside structure, looking for the mate. Bishop e7 is played. Now a good pause your video moment. What is the best way for black to handle this position? And again, keep in mind that only a win will do in this scenario. If you draw, the team loses. Well, you found the way to keep the fight going. E takes f3, sacrificing the rook in order to be able to get this attack. Now, for the more difficult thing, how can we set the most practical problems for the opponent to go wrong here? Well, we offer the f4 pawn. And as the king tries to run, need to continue to maintain threats. g5. And it shows that even strong masters in complicated positions like this can have big blunders. c4 was played in the game, and after takes, queen b6 checkmate. What is the best line where White would go on to win this match? King e5, where the best black has here is a perpetual. So White's just going to go back, king e5, king f6. Hopefully you enjoyed the interview and this game. If you did, smash that like button and leave us a nice comment down below. What was your takeaway from the interview? Thanks for joining in.